Hello and welcome to our webinar on the principles of Office Ergonomics. My goal is that by the end of this session, you'll feel more confident that you can assess your own workstation or maybe another person's workstation, and that you can also make some changes so that everyone's more comfortable. So let's get started. So how long is 30 minutes and why is that important? As an example of that, what I want you to do is take a minute or so to find the timer feature on your phone. Usually it's under the clock app. Select timer and set it for 30 minutes. A lot of times it can be very beneficial to change postures periodically throughout the day. When we sit too long or stand too long, it's very fatiguing on our body. And even if we're able to get in the correct sitting or standing postures, we still need to move. But a lot of times we get so into our work that we forget to move. And using this timer feature on your phone is that audible reminder to get up and move. So I'll give you just a sec to do that on your phone and we'll go ahead. This webinar is going to review what ergonomics is, what proper posture is, the need for breaks, and generally where equipment should be placed in an office setting. Let's go over then what ergonomics is. Ergonomics is the science of designing the job to fit the worker and not forcing the worker to fit the job. Essentially, we know now what's healthier for the body, and through adjusting our equipment like our chairs, our desks, or adding accessory factors like a wrist rest or foot rest, we can put the body in a more healthy position rather than forcing the person to conform to the limitations of our equipment. So what factors affect our comfort? We'll take a look at these in a little more detail, but in summary, static or prolonged postures, that's asking our body to be in one position for too long, can affect our comfort. Awkward postures may affect us. There are certain positions of the body that are healthier and more comfortable than others, and I'm going to review those as well. Repetition, asking the same body part to do the same motions over and over again can be very fatiguing. Forceful exertions. It may not be as prevalent in an office setting as compared to an industrial setting, but sometimes we do have to push or pull things, lift, lower things, carry things. So those are examples of forceful exertions. Sometimes we have to do a lot of hand force activities like constantly gripping the mouse or stapler. And those are examples of other types of forces. Contact stress is another factor. That's when any part of our body is in contact with a hard surface. For example, wrist rests, those gel wrist rests that we may use for the keyboard or the mouse, a lot of times that prevents us from that contact stress or our wrist directly resting on that hard work surface. The environment can also play a factor. For example, cold temperature. When we're cold, we tend to tense our body up. That shortens muscles and may fatigue those muscles and structures at a much faster rate. Lighting can also be another factor. If the lighting has too much contrast between areas that we're working at, that can affect us and maybe lend to eye strain. Or if it's not enough lighting, we may bend forward. We may bend our back or bend our neck down to try to read something when there's not enough lighting. The more of these factors we can address and mitigate or even eliminate, it's going to help our overall comfort. I mentioned static or prolonged postures as one factor. A static posture, or what we call static loading, refers to physical exertion in which the same posture or position is held throughout the exertion. These types of exertions put increased loads or forces on the muscles and tendons and then contributes to fatigue. We all probably have had the example of going on a car ride that's been way too long. Maybe after 4 or 5 hours, we finally pull over to get gas or to stretch. When we first get out of the car, we notice we're pretty stiff, and it may take several seconds to straighten up and to move around. And that's an example of the effects of static posture, not moving. So as I've mentioned, the remedy is to get moving, to change postures. If you can, every 20 or 30 minutes or so is probably our ultimate goal. I mentioned awkward postures is another factor that affects our comfort. I'm going to go through different body segments and point out what the preferred postures are and what ones you should avoid. Here's an example of the hand and the wrist. The middle one, or neutral, is our preferred posture. The other ones are ones we either want to avoid or eliminate altogether. If you can pick out one that especially occurs with the mouth, if you look at the bottom, the radial deviation and then the ulnar deviation, that's when we bend the wrist toward our thumb or toward our little finger. And again, as I mentioned, that's often with the mouth. And why that may be even trickier is that we're doing it for prolonged periods and we're using force at the same time, because for the standard mouth, we end up having to grip it all day to move it. So again, our aim is to have that neutral wrist position. For the hands and the wrists, to attain that position, generally we want our keyboard and mouse centered to us around elbow height and on a flat surface, whether that's on a tray, or if you lift your keyboard up, you'll notice there's two stands underneath it generally. You want to flatten those or tuck them under so that the keyboard lays flat. When those are extended, our keyboard is tilted and we end up tilting our wrist as well to compensate. We also want to make sure our keyboard and mouse are placed together on the same height and in close proximity to each other so that we use good postures for that. To obtain that, generally you can adjust your chair height, desk height, although that's sometimes a little trickier. You also want to look at ways to reduce repetition and force. For example, there's a lot of shortcuts you can take on your keyboard that result in less keystrokes and overall less repetition. Using wrist rests for the keyboard and mouse, like gel ones, may help avoid that contact stress. You may also want to look into alternate style keyboards or an alternate style mouse. For example, there's some mouse out there, or mice out there, that don't require any gripping at all. They're just a touch pad that you glide your finger on or tap lightly and don't result in any type of gripping at all. Another thing you can try is switching your hands when you're using a mouse. Most of us use our dominant hand for the mouse. If you can, every couple hours or so, try using the mouse on your other side, on your non-dominant side. That allows that other hand, your dominant hand, to have some kind of rest. And honestly, it may only take a few minutes, but you'll get pretty proficient with your non-dominant hand. It really doesn't take that long. As I mentioned, take breaks. What you want to avoid is your keyboard and mouse to one side or tilted or too high or too low. As I mentioned, that constant keying or mouse use, that repetition, that pressure, the gripping. Another thing you may want to be mindful of is performing hand strengthening exercises when you're on breaks, unless you're under a physician or therapist care and they recommend that you do. But generally, we want to use those rest breaks for that purpose. We want to rest those hands, especially if you've been doing a lot of hand-intensive activity like keying or using the mouse. Also check that your mouse isn't too wide. If it's so that when you're gripping it, you're using the very end of your fingertips to try to hold on to it, it's probably too wide for you and adding more stress to your hand. You may want to find one that's more narrow. Also, with your mouse, if you're using one that has a cord on it, make sure the cord is long enough so that it's not adding force to pull every time you have to move the mouse. Make sure it's not getting in the way. Obviously, a cordless mouse eliminates those issues, but if you do have a cord, just make sure it's not too tight that you're having to pull on it every time you use the mouse. The next one is our shoulders and elbows that we'll take a look at. The picture up there is an example of what not to do. What you do want to do though, your preferred posture is your shoulders level with your elbows bent 90 degrees. So if we were to look at your profile, we would generally see that the side of your body, your arm is in an L position, meaning the elbows bent 90 degrees. To help do that, you want to keep reaches generally below your shoulder height and above your knee height when you're sitting. Reach ranges should generally be about 6 inches to 14 inches in front of the body. You want your elbows near your waist at the side of your body, not in front like the picture. You want to also decrease contact stress to the elbow. Again, looking at the picture, because the keyboard is so far in front of her and or her chair is too far back, it's resulting in her arms resting, especially her elbows, right on that hard edge of the desk. So sometimes moving the keyboard close or your chair close together, you can then have your elbows at the side of your body. Another place of contact stress might be your elbow resting on your armrest of your chair. If you do have armrests, make sure that they're not causing your shoulders to elevate so that you look like you're shrugging. And then with your arms at the side of your body, they shouldn't be causing you to elevate. So to adjust it, what you want to do is put your shoulders level and relaxed, lower the armrests all the way down to the lowest position, and then bend your arms 90 degrees so your wrists and elbows are even. And then raise your armrest so that it's just below that height to support your arms, but not cause your shoulders to elevate. So again, adjust your chair, armrest, the keyboard, the mouse, and the heights of these to help attain the good posture. You want to generally avoid reaching behind the body frequently or above the shoulder frequently, or your hand crossing the center of the body, meaning your right hand reaching to the left side of your desk for things frequently. Again, we want to avoid that elbow winging, or I call it chicken position, where the elbows are away from the body, reaching too far away. And I pretty much have mentioned these other things, looking at the heights of your equipment or direct pressure on your elbows. For your spine, and we'll start with the low back, you want to aim for an upright posture. You want to generally work around waist height or no higher than elbow height. Optimally, a sit-stand change is the best or preferred. We still want to maintain that about 6 inches to 14 inches of equipment from our desk edge. When we're standing, reaches should generally be between the waist and shoulder. When we're sitting, between our knee to shoulder. It's really important when you are sitting, you use the backrest of your chair. If yours adjusts, you want to make sure the curve of your backrest is in the curve of your low back. If it doesn't do that, if it doesn't adjust enough, or maybe it's fixed and doesn't adjust at all, it may help to get a lumbar pillow, like a roll style pillow, a half roll or a full roll, to fill in the curvature of your low back and give it some support. A footrest often is very critical, not just for our lower body, but it may also help your back to feel better, because it'll help you get your knees even with your hips and support your lower body, which can also be an important factor in your back feeling better too. Although it may not happen a lot, make sure if you do have to lift or carry things or push and pull things, that you're using good material handling techniques, like keeping items close to the body, keeping your spine upright. Things you want to avoid is, again, prolonged sitting or twisting and bending frequently, reaching above your shoulder or below your waist level frequently, not having back support, sitting on the edge of your chair, extended reaching, having to look at monitors or viewing areas that are too high or too low or too far from us. Those all can affect the posture of our spine as well. And as I mentioned, poor body mechanics, like lifting and carrying loads away from the body, may be a factor too. Here's an example of improper on the left and proper posture on the right. If you notice the one on the left, she's kind of scrunched forward. She's not sitting upright. She's not utilizing the backrest of her chair for good support, and generally just bad overall. The picture on the right is much better. her spine and is in an upright posture, and she's utilizing the backrest of her chair. And that just means sometimes sitting closer to your desk and sitting all the way back in your chair as well. One thing you can think of is drop an imaginary line from the ceiling. We call it a plumb line. To make sure your spine's in good posture or alignment, you want that line, imaginary or not, going through your ear, your shoulder, your elbow, and your hip. And if it's passing through all of those points, then we're generally in a good upright posture. Another part of our spine I want to talk about is our neck or cervical area. The preferred posture is to keep your chin level and not like the picture here. To do that, it sometimes can really help to have a headset, use document holders so we're not tilting our head down to look at flat documents on our desk. When we're sitting in the normal posture, you want your eye to be just looking over the top of your computer monitor. So generally, we'll adjust our monitor last after we adjust our chair or our desk height and things like that. It helps to center our paperwork and our monitor so that we're not always looking to one side. Monitor and documents should be about the same height and distance. If it's a multi-user workstation, it can really help to have an adjustable monitor stand so that each person can adjust the monitor to their own needs. We generally want to avoid bending our head downward or backward or to the side. So again, backward may occur if our monitor is too high or we wear corrective lenses. So if you wear bifocals, trifocals, you may find you're tilting your head back quite a bit to look at your monitor. You may need to put your monitor even lower on your desk. So again, you're generally looking over the top through the corrective part of your glasses. You want to avoid cradling the phone between your neck and shoulder, and that's where that headset comes in. Sometimes speakerphone can help, but again, in an office setting with others around or for privacy purposes, we may not always be able to do that. We don't often talk about our lower body, but I did want to include it. Our preferred posture is to have our knees even with our hips, with our ankle 90 degrees. In the picture on the left, this is one we generally would want to avoid. If we look here at the profile, the knees are definitely lower than the hips. We would want to see the thighs or legs level or parallel with the ground. We don't want to tuck our feet back. We want to have our ankles directly under our knees or even in front of it a little bit for knee joint comfort. Again, a sit-stand option is preferred. When we are sitting, our feet should be flat and supported, as I mentioned, in under or in front of the knee, our knees even with the hip. So again, your leg, your thigh should be level or parallel with the ground. Make sure you have enough toe and thigh clearance under your workstation, that there's no contact stress. Try to make sure too that the seat edge isn't touching the back of your knees. That's very uncomfortable. A lot of times if our seat is too long for us, people compensate and they sit closer to the edge of the seat so that we're not getting that seat touching our knees. But unfortunately then, we give up getting any kind of back support from our chair. If that's the case, some chairs do adjust. You can change the depth of the seat with a lever under your chair. In other cases, it may help to get like a square pillow. So that way, you can sit closer to the front of the edge of the chair so that you're not getting that contact stress in the back of your knees, but then you're still getting some kind of support from the pillow for your back. As I mentioned, things to avoid, you want to avoid your foot behind your knee higher or lower than your hip, that force or compression or lack of space. Some of these factors too will often contribute to back and hip discomfort. So if you make changes for your lower body, you may also find an improvement in your comfort in your hip and your low back. In review, I wanted to go over sitting posture because we covered a lot of information and I want a chance to just review it one more time. Before we do that, again, look at your setup. Focus first on the tasks that you do the most often, and also set up based on your hand dominance as well. Proper sitting posture in review is that your chin is level with your head centered. Your shoulders are level and relaxed and not elevated up because of the armrest or the top of the desk. Your elbows are at the side of your body as pictured here. They're not in front of you. The elbows are also about keyboard height. The forearms are parallel or level with the ground with your wrists straight or neutral. The trunk and head is vertically aligned. Your knees and hips are about the same height. So again, your thigh is level or parallel with the ground. The knees are bent 90 degrees. Your feet are flat on the floor or on a footrest. And again, the ankle is directly under the knee or slightly in front. Let's go over standing as well. There are some potential benefits studies have found with standing. For example, it may help reduce low back pain and swelling. Other studies have found that can burn more calories than sitting, so it may help with your weight control program. Other studies have found it may increase energy and help you be more energetic throughout the workday. But keep in mind, MSDs, musculoskeletal disorders, which are the type of disorders we're trying to prevent with ergonomics, can result from any long-term static posture, whether you're sitting or standing. Some people actually find standing in one place at a computer like this actually makes them feel worse. It can make their feet feel worse. It can make their backs feel worse. The idea behind a standing workstation is that it allows you to change postures, and that's what we want to take advantage of. Standing in one place can be more tiring, placing additional loads on our circulatory system and increase our risk of diseases like varicose veins. So again, get moving, sitting, standing, alternating is preferred. So to review our posture for that, it's generally the same as it was for sitting. When we are standing, make sure your weight is evenly distributed on both feet, from the heels to the balls of your feet. Don't stand with all your weight on one leg. Generally, put your feet about shoulder width apart. Don't lock your knees. Keep in mind to keep your knees soft and not locking your legs and not placing all your weight on one leg. Avoid wearing heels. Flat shoes are generally better. For some of us, it may help to have a small little platform or step stool that we can put one foot on and alternate that with our other foot, because sometimes that can help our back and hips feel a little better when standing. Just make sure it doesn't create a trip hazard. It doesn't cause you to twist to get to the workstation, get closer to it, or that it puts you in a bad posture, for example, putting your knee higher than your hip. In some cases, a small anti-fatigue mat may also improve your comfort. For example, if you're standing on cement or a really hard floor, but again, also make sure it's not a trip hazard. Keep your items close to you, your keyboard, your mouse, as we already discussed. And keep in mind, use good material handling techniques when you're raising and lowering your workstation. For example, if you have to reach way in the back of the desk to raise and lower everything, try to bend your knees and keep your spine upright. The same principles apply. If I haven't mentioned it enough, keep moving. Even with good postures, if they're maintained long enough, they'll eventually become uncomfortable and even potentially damaging. So make sure you're moving. Let's talk next about equipment placement. Look here first at the keyboard and the mouse. The top picture is our preferred posture. If you look, the equipment's close together and the user's wrists are straight or neutral. The forearm is generally level or parallel with the ground. The bottom two pictures are what we want to avoid. If you notice, the keyboard's tilted in both directions, but what that results in is awkward wrist postures, ones that we generally want to avoid. So again, straight wrist. Elbows should be at the side of the body and not in front of the body. So if you look at the picture on the left, this is one we want to avoid. The keyboard is she's sitting too far from the keyboard. So just sliding the chair in closer will bring her elbows to the side of her body. Picture on the right is our preferred posture. The elbows are at the side of the body. For our chair, make sure your armrests aren't too high and don't elevate your shoulders. Adjust the height if needed. As I mentioned before, take a look at your profile. If you feel like you're shrugging your shoulders when using the armrests, they're too high. See if you can lower them so that your shoulders are level and relaxed. The armrests are just underneath supporting your arms. Check that your armrest provides the support, but also don't prevent you from sitting closer to your work. Sometimes we may need to lower the armrest just so we can slide the chair underneath or close to the desk. If you look here as well, the armrest may be also resulting in contact stress to the elbow area. Looking some more at the chair, I mentioned there might be a chance of contact stress between the front of the chair to the back of the person's knees. And here's an example of that. Generally, you want about at least 2 finger widths of space between the front of the chair to the back of the knees, because we don't want the person sitting on the edge of the chair and not having any kind of back support. If it's less than that, see if your chair adjusts. Sometimes, again, you can change the depth of the chair. If it doesn't, consider getting like a back wedge or pillow, one similar to the picture on the slide. What this does, again, is it allows you to sit closer to the edge of the chair, but still gives you some back support. Here's an example of the space we're looking for between the back of the knee and the front of the chair. Again, get familiar with your chair. A lot of us have maybe never taken the time to see the different adjustments it provides. Again, sometimes we can change the depth of the seat. We can adjust the backrest of the chair. We can adjust the angle of the seat. There's so many different features on chairs now. So look at the different levers. Hopefully you can still find the brochure that came with the chair and get to learn the different features about your chair. I mentioned earlier, your backrest should fit right about in the curve of your low back. So adjust the height of it so that you get that support. If the chair doesn't adjust, or even if it does adjust but not enough for you, I mentioned you can look at a curved roll here like this. They come in a half roll or full rolls just to give you that extra support in the back of your chair. This is an example of a chair backrest that's too far back, leaning back. It's causing the user to slant backward. And what that will do, the person typically compensates for that and will cran their neck forward, jut their chin forward to better view the screen or their documents because they're leaning back. So that results in some stress to the neck area and shoulder area. We can easily avoid that by just having the chair more upright. As I mentioned before, you want the keyboard flat on the desktop or flat on a keyboard tray so that your wrist can be straight. You'll notice this one's on an angle and that subsequently bends her wrist, which is not a posture we want. Also, you may note there's contact stress because the wrists are directly on that hard surface. A nice gel wrist rest may help reduce that contact stress. The keyboard and mouse should be at the same height and in close proximity to each other. In this example, they're too far away from each other. She's doing a lot of reaching to one side. We want to keep them close together. Now let's talk a little bit about our monitors. Again, I generally adjust the chair, the desk, and equipment, and the monitor is one of the last things I will adjust. Nowadays, many of us are working with more than one monitor. We may have 2 or even more monitors at our desk. So where do we put those? So based on these pictures here, are these wrong? Yes, no, maybe. The answer really is it depends on how much the monitor is actually used. For one monitor, center that directly in front of you. You generally don't want it to one side because then you're always twisting your neck, your head, to that one side to look at it, and that can be very fatiguing. With two monitors, you generally want to put them together at the same height and distance. If they're used about the same amount of time, position them like a book in front of you with the far ends turned in slightly. Where they meet should be centered to you. Now I'm going to stop for just a minute. My timer on my phone went off, so if you want to stand for the rest of the webinar, feel free. Or if you want to just stand for a minute or two while I finish the webinar, that's fine. But you can see how quick 30 minutes went. It goes pretty fast when you actually are counting it. So go ahead and stand or take your break. When you do sit down again, restart your timer at 30 minutes. I will continue with the two monitors. So again, in summary, if they're used about the same amount of time, position them book style in front of you with the far ends turned in slightly. The person should be right where they meet in the center. If one monitor is used considerably more than the other, it can be centered in front of the user with the other close by. So if you have two monitors, let's say, and you use one of the monitors 85, 90% of the time, it may be better to center that monitor in front of you with the other one to the side, but still directly right there. This way, at least most of your time, your chin is neutral and your head is centered. As far as monitor height, when you're looking straight ahead, make sure your chin is level. Your gaze should be looking just over the top of the monitor. It's okay even if you're looking down about 15 or 20 degrees below that line of vision. What we especially want to avoid, though, is having to turn your head or tilt your chin upward, tilting your head back. So if you wear corrective lenses, bifocals, trifocals especially, you may need to even put that monitor lower so that when your chin is level, you're looking through the corrective part of your glasses, you should still be looking over the top of your monitor. How about distance? How far should our monitors be away? Well, studies have found minimally they should be about 24 inches away. How far should they be? Really, at this point, there's not a maximum. Put them at a distance that's comfortable for you. Generally, that may be about arm's length away. Just make sure, however far you put it away from you, that you're not squinting your eyes to read it or bending forward or craning your neck to try to see the monitor. And that may be a helpful guide as well. In this example, the top picture, you can see the monitor is way too high. You can see that she's having to tilt her head back or up to view her monitor. The picture on the bottom is much better positioned. The chin is neutral, looking straight ahead. How about monitor glare? You want to make sure you don't have any glare reflections on your screen because that can lend often to eye fatigue. Use your window blinds if you have them, or put your monitor 90 degrees to the windows. What that means is you don't want to be facing a window when you're at your computer. You also don't want to have a window directly behind you while you're looking at your computer because those things will add to the glare. You can also tilt your monitor down maybe a little bit. That sometimes gets rid of the glare. Just make sure it doesn't change your head and neck posture. Make sure if you're using task lighting, it's directed away from your eyes. And also make sure you have a matte workstation, that you don't have a highly reflective work surface. One last thing as well, make sure that the lighting in your general work area is consistent. You don't want a very dark area next to a very bright area because that big contrast may also be fatiguing to your eyes. Some other things that might be contributing to your eye discomfort are just the characteristics of your computer. Maybe the font is hard to see. Maybe it's very dusty. You haven't dusted it off in a long time, so you're squinting maybe just to view the characters better. Home conditions, workplace conditions, sometimes like dry air may contribute to our eyes feeling more fatigued. And also what they call blue light, the light emitted from our phones, our laptops, or iPads, for example, may also be contributing to that eye strain too. So what can you do about it? There's what's called the 20-20-20 rule. What that means is every 20 minutes, look at least 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds, just to change up your focal point. And gives your eyes a little bit of a rest. There's a lot of apps out there that can help you with that, again, as reminders, like we just did with a timer on our phone to change postures. Maybe when you change postures, that's another good time to give your eyes a break as well, so you're incorporating both things at once. Another thing with the desk, just make sure underneath the desk is clear so that you have full leg and knee clearance. This allows you to sit close to your work and allow movement so you can extend your legs out, do some ankle rotations, things like that. Just make sure there's no contact stress to the body. This wraps up our webinar. Thank you so much for your time in attending this. I hope you found this information helpful and useful, and that you find that you're a lot more comfortable or that you can help someone else with this information.